a moment to give us a sense of how the Nigerian public reacts to your investigations, because I think some of those same questions that are being raised now around the Snowden case around the world have come about on some of your investigations. So especially since you run the operation out of New York and not Nigeria, how is all of that working out?
Well, when we started, there was disbelief in the public, because naturally, as you always notice, people want great journalists to be great investigative sources. And when they saw bricklayers and carpenters like us doing the work, they just couldn't believe it, because here they have all the big guys, with their suit and their big laptops and newsrooms, sitting on all these stories, and we're breaking them beneath them. But it was well received, But of course, we had a lot of pushback. For example, I was sued 3 times in New York, in the U.S., by entities close to the Nigerian government, because we're reporting also on, fraud going on in the embassies. And each time you mention a U.S. lawyer involved, he sues you because the Nigerian government goes behind him. So I was sued 3 times, and I was exposed to the U.S. legal system. But I must say to all of you that the greatest danger to press freedom is governments. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter whether it's the U.S. government, UK government, or some shadow government somewhere. Governments just don't like to be exposed. And the important thing is for journalists to understand that it's not going to be a piece of cake. It's not going to be welcoming. It's not going to be receptive. It's not going to be popular to do the kind of thing we do. And we are always going to be safe. As a matter of fact, the more impact your work have on society, the less safe you become as a source of providing sunlight and sunshine in the dark areas of government. But it's also been rewarding for us in the sense that we've been appreciated by the Nigerian people, and even outside of Nigeria, people appreciate the kind of work we do. We not only go after the Nigerian government, by the way, we go after corporations like Chevron, Shell. All of them are part of the international conspiracy and corruption that is part of the problem that we are all discussing here. And finally, I just want to say, by repeating what everybody knows, that journalism is more important work for us to leave it to journalists to do by themselves. So people have to be vigilant and become journalists themselves for us to bring down the wall of oppression that keeps all of us in an open prison in this world. Because governments don't just want you to know how they operate. And we must know, and we must make sure we find out.
Can you safely go to Nigeria?
No, I do go to Nigeria because I had, after doing this work, I had to create my own airport. Near to
How much do they cost? Such you can follow up their investigative journalism.
And that's what they call disruptive technology.
But you raised some questions that Bruno was referencing too. Is it the public too, which is being served by this, but there's a level of skepticism and distrust that's arisen. I don't know if that's where you're going with your question, but whatever it is.
Almost. It's a question more for Omoyele, but I'm sure Irina and the others might want to chip in as well on this. Journalists we like to compete with each other and make sure that our paper or our news organisation gets the story first. But one of the great advantages we have for our stories is that if they make an impact, everyone else follows on. And I wonder whether you have this problem increasingly in Russia and in Nigeria, where there aren't enough others to follow on. In Nigeria a few years ago, there was a wonderful new newspaper called Next, which broke some great stories, but then those stories went nowhere. They dropped a pebble in a pond, and there were no ripples because no one else followed it up. And I wonder whether this was a struggle for you with the work that you're doing, trying to get other news organisations in Nigeria, and I guess as the space closes in Russia, other news organisations in Russia to actually follow up your stories so they become part of the broader conversation.
Good. Thank you for the question. Omoyele?
Well, our first greatest problem and enemies were the Nigerian media, the established media. They just wouldn't accept that we have a right to even publish in the first place. And that was the problem Next faced. But there was something we did that none of them did because we recognized this very early. We gave ownership of our stories to ordinary people because we sourced it from them. So social media became one of our most powerful means of distribution of news. And I would say, I've never met the next guy before, but one thing I wanted to tell him when he came was the fact that the traditional means of distribution wasn't going to work. He was, buying printing press and, a lot of newspaper, acres of newspapers. But, at that time, newspapers had moved to a different level, which was digital. And we use that extensively. I mean, we have like 800,000 fans on Facebook. We have about, 250,000 followers on Twitter. And they are very active. This is organic, means of distribution of news. And I think what has not happened is that the same Nigerian traditional media practitioners, as they love to call themselves, who rejected us at the beginning, now lash on our stories. In fact, they use our stories as excuses for writing their own story. Because, the big men will call them and say, why did you write about me? Oh, we saw it on Sahara Reporters, sir. And of course, it's very difficult to catch Sahara Reporters. But it's easy to catch them because they are all within the same space.
Right.